studio, we have Michelle Chalmers, a graduate of Wellesley High School. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks for having me, Rama. Appreciate it.
So welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Michelle is a polymath. She does so many things. She is a board member for World of Wellesley and Metco. She's a Metco host coordinator, a parent network coordinator at WMS, and she also created a diversity committee at Bates Elementary School. She's a co-producer of the Learning Tree discussions on diversity and inclusion here at Wellesley Media Corp. And last but not least, Michelle is also the author of a children's book, and I'm going to hold it up. It's called The Skin on My Chin. It's a rhyming picture book for children ages 2 to 8 and their parents to enjoy. Is this someone you know on the cover?
It is. That is actually my son, Derek.
Awesome.
Yes, taken about 4 or 5 years ago. So at least he looks, he's a little bit older now at 11,
Okay.
but he loved having his cover, his picture on the book.
Awesome. So tell us, what was the inspiration for your book?
Absolutely. The Skin on My Chin, my inspiration was kind of really took a whole gamut of my life. I've always loved children's books, and I actually didn't really get a fondness for children's books until really late. Not as a child, but actually in high school and in college when I was a daycare teacher. And I loved reading books to children, and I just got really into children's books. And when I had my 2 boys, I would read to them all the time. And I would buy those, did you ever see those, they're just like white notebooks, and they're plain, and they're like a book, and inside and you can make books. So I used to do that. I used to make books for my kids. So it was something that I've always wanted to do. And so it was always in the back of my head. And then when I had my children and got into school with them and got introduced into more books, but also into all of the things that you listed in terms of the extracurricular activities that I do with my kids and the volunteering I do in Wellesley, I started to realize that there were parents like myself that wanted to be able to talk to their kids about differences. And this book is specifically targeting racial differences by talking about skin. And so when I would put together at the Bates Diversity Committee, we would put together parent groups, and we would have speakers come in and talk to parents about how do you talk to your kids about differences, how do you talk to your kids about disabilities, how do you talk to your kids about race. The parent group that we had that was how do you talk to your kids about race, it was full. There were so many people there. However, I just didn't feel like I came away with really something that I could really use. Maybe a little tidbit here and there, but it was such a difficult process to sort of look through my own biases and then sort of figure out, okay, how am I going to sort of keep that for my kids and have a discussion so I can really engage my children in these discussions and do it in a way that sort of removes my own internalized bias. And so, I said, it'd really be great if I had a book. Because, as parents, we go to books and we get a little help to be able to begin conversations and talk to the kids. I know that I've used books when people have died, unfortunately, in our family, and there's some great books out there and how to engage children in conversations when you have a difficult conversation to talk about. So I know that's a long sort of how it came about.
So it's fun. It addresses diversity.
Yes.
And it's a self-help tool.
That's right.
In a lot of ways as well.
That was exactly my goal, Rama, is to create a tool for parents and teachers to be able to begin a conversation with children or continue a conversation with children as young as 2, 3 years old. This book is really geared as a picture book. It's a rhyming picture book for children from 2 to 8. And the studies have shown that we should really be talking to our children about differences, and specifically racial differences, because they notice them. One of the things that I realized is that some parents feel that their children don't see it. My child's colorblind. My child doesn't notice anything like that. My child doesn't see that. That's just not true. We actually help our children to point out for differences, right? Or we help our children to learn about colors. We say, this is red, and this is blue, and this is yellow, and we get so excited when they know their colors. But then somehow we think that they don't notice skin color.
It's
and
interesting. It's interesting you bring that up. There's a recent study in the last year or two conducted by child psychologists.
Yes.
And they conduct studies in toddlers and infants, like 3 to 6 months, and older children as well, toddlers and also older children. And they find that children are born with certain innate abilities to parse through a whole bunch of environmental stimuli, and who's nice, who's not, who deserves punishment, who doesn't. And they notice quite a lot of things right off the bat.
They do.
And so we once thought that children, especially a 3-month-old infant, wouldn't know anything, but that's clearly not. We're finding out that's clearly not the case.
You're exactly right. And there's a lot of research out there right now that's very, very interesting that talks about just that.
Right.
And so some of my studies, I'm actually studying at University of Colorado Springs right now, getting a certificate in social justice and diversity and inclusion. And so there's just a whole wealth of knowledge and information that I've been reading about. And one of the things that I found really interesting is that sort of innate ability to sort of make judgments and categorize came from our ancestors way back when people first landed on the planet in Africa.
Running through the savannah.
That's right. And
they
had
decisions.
Because the lion is behind them, right? So you need to make a snap decision, because are we going to get eaten by the lion or are we not?
So you think there's an evolutionary basis?
There definitely is. But we've evolved so much that I don't have to worry about you eating me. Right. I can look and say, you know what, that's right. So I don't have to make that snap decision anymore.
Right.
I can actually sit with you and get to know you and not make a snap judgment based on the color of your skin, based on the color of my skin, or your eyes, or what you're wearing, or what you look like. We have the time and we have the communication skills as human beings to be able to talk with each other and learn about each other.
And so from your studies, your expertise, do you think that this is a learned ability that children acquire rather than there's something that they're born with? The issue of color blindness or acceptance?
I think that children definitely notice differences, but they don't put the bias or the judgment to it until they're given that as they get older. So I think that when we raise our children, they are certainly yes, they might categorize and might gravitate towards people that might look like them or act like them. But that's why it's important to have the discussion, because if I believe as a child that people that look like me think like me, and people that don't look like me don't act like me or don't think like me. And so they have that sort of concrete sort of this is this and this is this. And that's why these discussions are important, because if we don't have these discussions, our society and our media are going to tell them those things. And that's why it's so important to have these discussions with children so young, to be able to say, you know what, people might look different, but they can like the same things. And that's what's important to understand. So
you're also fostering an ability in young children to make some decision making based on their own viewpoints and their own feelings.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly right. I think that we have to have continuous process of discussion and exposure in order for any difference to become comfortable, whether it's racial differences or differences in disability or ability, that the more comfort we have around that difference, then the easier or accepted or acknowledged it becomes. And so there are important things that we need to learn about each other, and we need to have these conversations with our children, but it's hard. It is hard to sit down and have the right words, and what happens if I say something wrong, and I talk about this in the book. The book is a short 14 pages to sort of engage the conversation, but then there's a whole host of questions and sort of some discussion that I give you that sort of can help parents work through their own thoughts. But again, engage the child, and this could be a book that you read at 2 years old and have no discussion. You just read it, and at 3 years old, maybe have a little discussion, and then you pick it up again at 5, 6, 7, or 8, and have a bigger discussion. And I think it's important that if you do say something wrong, or you feel like you said something wrong, you can always go back and tell your child. I do it all the time. I don't know about you, but I've told my son, I said, you know what, Marcus, what I said to you last week wasn't right. I actually learned something better, that I should have probably said this. And I do it all the time. We make mistakes, and it's okay.
So let me ask you this question. Speaking of diversity and being here in Wellesley, so you went to Wellesley High School.
I did.
And so did you grow up here, or did you move here just for high school?
Sure, yeah, another interesting story.
Right,
I hope it's
right,
okay.
yeah.
But I had an interesting childhood. Unfortunately, my mother was sick with cancer. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so she passed away when I was young. And so we did a lot of moving. And so I actually lived in 3 different towns. And I ended up in Wellesley in high school. And so the 2 towns that I was in before, I think living in Massachusetts, or maybe, you can attest to this, that certain towns have different...
Well, every town has its flavor.
It does have its flavor. You're exactly right. And Wellesley was always looked at as a town that, and I think still is very committed to education and has a wonderful school system. And so ending up in Wellesley after being in 2 towns that might not have had that type of input there, Wellesley for me really gave me a real push to continue my education, where the 2 schools that I had lived or worked, went through for elementary school and for middle school did not do. I was basically told, you can go to high school and you can graduate and then you'll be okay.
Right.
Where Wellesley, it was like, no, you're going to college. And so I was the first person in my family to go to college.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, and obviously get a master's degree too. So, so Wellesley has a really, big part in my heart and in my life.
And do you have siblings?
I do.
Right?
I do.
Right.
Yeah, I have 2 older siblings, and I have a younger brother.
And
Me and my younger brother went to Wellesley High,
Awesome.
but my older sister and my older brother were older, so they actually graduated from the town that we lived in before.
Okay.
So and did not go to college.
And being here in Wellesley, how do you? What is your take on the topic of diversity?
Yes.
What is your assessment? How do you feel that Wellesleyites are about diversity issues?
That's right. Well, I think that is another motivation for the book. Growing up in Wellesley, it was pretty homogeneous. It was pretty much mostly all white people growing up. We had the METCO program, so it brought a little diversity in terms of racial diversity and, of course, of other parts of diversity too, of just bringing people who live in different areas and different towns to Wellesley. So that was a great experience. But raising biracial children now, my husband is beautifully black, and my children are beautiful also.
Yes, and that's very
true. And that's Derek. Yes. So being a white mom and raising children of color in Wellesley has definitely been interesting, and I think it's been great in a sense. My boys are getting a great education. That's why I live here. They have great friends, and it's a great community. But I think that being in a homogeneous community, you just don't have that exposure that I talked about before, that in order to have comfort with differences, you have to have that exposure. And there isn't that exposure. I think that the diversity certainly has increased or is improved. Thank God, from when I lived here back 30 years ago, going to high school. But there's still a long way to go in terms of seeing how diversity and difference affects us, and why it's important to think about, and why it's important for us to talk about.
And do you feel that in terms of numbers of diverse students in school systems, or just the awareness of diversity?
Both.
Yeah.
I really think both. I think that when I created the diversity committee at Bates, I found that it was difficult for many people to put their head around what is the diversity committee and what does it mean and how does that impact me, or what does that have to do with me? I don't really understand that. How does diversity, infect me when I'm white and I live in this town, and so that right there is a whole discussion about
why I should come to the meeting. And
right, exactly. When I want to say to people, you know, we put this social construct on ourselves as being white. What does that mean? I have no idea. But we have this social construct, and some reason we think that this means something. But if I was to say to two white people who live in Wellesley, well, if I put you both together, you're both the same. People will say, I'm not the same.
That's right,
I'm
yeah,
different.
right.
So there's diversity. There's diversity in
Right.
more than just those social construct names that we put
The
on
categories.
each other. Those categories. You're exactly right.
Right.
And so I think that was, and still is, one of the things that I'm hopefully trying to bring, you know, with the book and just my hopefully outwardness and outgoingness to have these conversations and talk
Right.
to anybody at any
Right.
time with no judgment
Right.
and no harm, no foul, that we can talk about this and we can move through some of these things, because I think that the importance of understanding and accepting everybody for who they are and who they can be is a wonderful thing. And to possibly stifle that in some way by not seeing someone for truly who they are and what they could be is sad when we think about that human capital that could be wasted because of something we said or we did or we didn't do. And I think that awareness, I'm hoping, you know, will come, and I see that it is changing as more and more people of color are moving into Wellesley, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
Excited about it for my children. But, you know, it's something that I think that people do want to do. In their hearts, they want to understand, and they want to acknowledge. And so I'm hoping that, you know, this book will help that.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. And I was going to ask you as well. So being part of the producer, founder of the Diversity Committee, so is this a monthly meeting that you have at school? So in the evenings, or something like that, and then it's just open to the entire school community for parents who would like to attend.
That's exactly right.
And then who and how do you who picks the topics, and how do you pick the discussion points
Yes.
for the meetings?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the principal, unfortunately, Bates has had 3 principals in the last 6
Right.
years. So that was
Wellesley's been going through a few changes.
That's right.
Including the superintendent.
Yes,
Right, so it's just-
exactly.
yes.
And the curriculum director.
Right,
And the,
right.
it has been very difficult. But the Michael Spencer, who was the principal there when Derek was in first grade, and I created the diversity committee, was very responsive to the diversity committee. We had teachers on board, we had parents on board, and we were very obviously engaged to be inclusive. We wanted everybody who wanted to be included. But obviously diversity means a lot of things.
Right.
And so we
Right.
had a lot of topics, and anybody could come up
Yeah.
with anything that they wanted to
Right.
talk
And
about.
do parents often come up and say, "Hey, we'd love to talk about this. Do you mind putting that in there for next time?"
Maybe
Yeah.
not as much as
Yeah.
I had hoped.
It'll
but
happen. It'll happen.
That's right.
You'll have to have a
That's right.
suggestion box by
Right.
the door when people like come in or leave. And then
Yes,
you can-
yes. And the biggest thing was just doing it at the right
Right,
times
right,
for people too.
Right, exactly.
We have a lot of
Right.
moms that want to
Right.
attend but either work or don't work
Right.
and have
Between the thousands of
situation with-
emails and multiple children.
That's right.
Yeah, yes, I'm sure it must be a challenge to,
It was a
to have
challenge.
parents come in and in addition address important other important topics as well.
That's right.
Right.
But
Well,
everyone was helpful
yes.
or excited that they participated. for
Absolutely, I
sure.
can imagine. I was going to ask you. We're just wrapping up
Sure.
our segment, but I wanted to ask you this before our time's up. I know that this is the 50th year, for example, for the women's movement, and being a woman such as yourself who does so much amazing work. I'm sure in high school, when you were here in Wellesley, you were thinking to yourself, one of these days I'm going to get on Metco, and I have a list. So you're someone who likes to do stuff, and
am.
you know who likes to move the world forward.
Yes.
So I want to ask you, what's your perspective? What's your take on American feminism and the women's movement in this country?
I think the women's movement is amazing, and I think that women are truly the key to moving our country and moving our world to where it needs to be. And I am I know it's you know, what was amazing to me, and I just saw an ad the other day, and this really summed it up for me, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, but there's a woman, or actually a child, I want to say she's like 11 or 12, and it looks like she's coming out of an airplane. They don't actually show the airplane, but they show this girl, this young girl, flying through the air. and she's coming down through the clouds, and she's coming down, and she lands on the earth, and the earth just crumbles. And she lands her 2 feet on the earth, and as the earth rumbles and the earth goes out amongst her feet, and all of a sudden the grass and the trees and the flowers and the schools and the buildings all come out around her. And it says the future of who we are is educating girls.
Wow, what an awesome commercial.
It was
I have
amazing.
to look for that now.
You have to. And
it's amazing that they picked a girl to do this.
well, that's the key. That is
Do
the
you think
key.
we're moving in the right direction then?
I do. I really do.
And-
We
and-
have to educate our young girls.
And
We
where
really
do you think we are today as women in this modern world in terms of juggling the family and the career and making up new topics for discussion for diversity in Wellesley?
I think we're right on point. I think we are amazing. I really do. I see so many women doing so many things and not being thanked for it all the time.
Right.
But we have each other to support each other.
That's true.
And, we realize what we have to do.
Yeah.
We realize as mothers and raising our children and really what this world can be
Awesome.
for our children.
So one last question.
And plus
So-
I had boys,
yeah,
right?
there you go.
Should have the girls.
All kids are good kids.
They are.
They
They
are.
are.
So I was going to ask you, what advice would you give to a Wellesley High School graduating student,
Okay.
boy or girl?
Yeah, boy or girl.
So class of 2014.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is very, very important, no matter who you are, is to respect yourself and to respect others. And I think that as a high school graduate or someone just starting college, you're going to meet a whole new set of people and a whole new world out there. And remember to be respectful, to respect others, and you'll get that back. I honestly feel that, but you do have to respect yourself and to respect others. I think that's really key.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. This has been so fascinating. We'll have to have you back in a few months to hear more about how the diversity initiative is going.
That'll be great.
Amongst your other projects.
Thank you. Maybe we can do something together.
Absolutely. I'd love it.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.